Okay, here we are. Welcome, everyone. Welcome tonight to WeHo Reads, Richard Blanco and Kim Dower in conversation during National Poetry Month. So there's still poetry, and we still get to hear it. So welcome, everyone. It's such a pleasure to have you all here. I'm Cody Cisco, your host for tonight. For Bookswell, which is producing this WeHo Read series on behalf of the City of West Hollywood. And I'm going to turn this over to Mike Che with the Arts Division at the city to tell us a little more about tonight's program.
Hi, thanks, Cody. My name is Mike Che. I am the arts coordinator for the City of West Hollywood, and WeHo Reads is one of our programs. We are so happy to celebrate National Poetry Month with you this April. And West Hollywood has no dearth of things that we do for National Poetry Month. We hang banners up honoring our living poets, including our two lovely guests tonight, Kim Dower, who was our second poet laureate of West Hollywood, and Richard Blanco, who was the inaugural poet for Barack Obama when he was president. We'll be hearing from them shortly. We do want to take a moment to acknowledge that the land upon which the city of West Hollywood is located is the occupied, seized territory of the Gabrielino Tongva and Gabrielino Teach peoples. We honor those the caretakers of our lands, past, present, and future. This program is brought to you by the City of West Hollywood, and we cannot do this without the generous support of our City Council. I believe we might have some City Council members with us. Cody, do you see any of our council members joining us?
I'm looking in the attendee list, but I don't see them here with us just now. I think they're still on their way.
Well, I'll tell you more about basically City of West Hollywood. We are just celebrating 40 years of cityhood this year, but we have a lot of poetry programs. We celebrate the poetry banners. We do this event. We have our poet laureate read a poem that is written on behalf of the city every year at our city council meeting. And we have had 5 fabulous poet laureates so far. Our current 5th poet laureate is Jen Cheng, and she wrote a wonderful poem for this year, which she's going to grace us with now. So Jen, if you'd like to unmute and share your poem.
Hi, thank you. I'm happy to celebrate National Poetry Month with you. And if you're in the city of West Hollywood, please stop by the West Hollywood Library, where Kim and other former poet laureates teach and I teach. And this Saturday we have Poetry Scrabble at 11 to 1 at the West Hollywood Library. This is the poem Eternity, and I'll give a little musical accompaniment that goes with it. Here we are. We poets write toward eternity, unpacking burdens and adversity. Despite the strife, we write into the light, tumble through exquisite sunset dreams, knit riddles with rhyme and embroider the scene. Tally up time on Route 66, count the winks of the moon, care for the heart before grief breaks us too soon. Archive recollections before they're disposed. Salvage our souls, alchemize rainbow jewels more precious than gold. Thank you. Happy National Poetry Month.
Wonderful. Thank you,
Thank you,
Jen.
Jen. That was beautiful. As Jen mentioned, she's teaching a writing workshop this Saturday at 11 o'clock at the West Hollywood Library. You can RSVP for that. You actually have to RSVP for that, and you can go to the West Hollywood Library's website to RSVP. In addition, the following weekend, not this upcoming Saturday, but the following one, our first poet laureate, Stephen Rains, will be teaching an autobiographical poetry workshop. And then Kim Dower, our fabulous guest tonight, will be teaching her series of poetry workshops about where poems come from all throughout May. So you can find those all on the West Hollywood Library's website and RSVP there, and they are all free. So that's fabulous. Speaking of free programs, this free WeHo Reads program is brought to you because of our City Council's generous support. I believe we have one of our council members in the audience, and John, would you like to say a few words to welcome our audience?
Sure. Hello from the beautiful city of Norwalk. I would never, ever miss a Kim Dower event. Richard, I love you too, but Kim Dower knows where I live and she will find me if I do not stay. So anyways, welcome everyone. I'm Councilmember John Erickson from the city of West Hollywood. I want to thank Kim, Richard, and our amazing current poet laureate, Jen Chang, for this incredible program. This is exactly the statement of values that our West Hollywood budget puts forward. That's investments in the arts, investments in culture, and investments in the arts that just make our world more beautiful. So that is exactly everyone on this panel today. I just thank you all for being the best and hope you have a really great time. And I'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, John. Without further ado, we would love to welcome Richard Blanco, inaugural poet for President Barack Obama. Also was recently the poet laureate for Miami-Dade County, and just a wonderful fellow all around. Kim Dower, second poet laureate of the city of West Hollywood. She wrote a fabulous collaborative poem drawn from prompts from 100 people in West Hollywood that you can see on our website, on our YouTube channel called I Sing the Body West Hollywood. Please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. And I just want to say, John Erickson, I voted for you. Okay, so I will always vote for you. And I love you. And West Hollywood is the greatest place on earth. I did see a little disclaimer at the beginning, Richard. I don't know if you saw it, but it says,
yes,
language or content, viewer discretion advised. Now I feel bad that I didn't choose some really dirty poems.
Me too. Not that I have that many dirty poems, but
I actually looked over like thousands of poems, and I only used the F word in one poem in my whole life. I don't want to medal for that, but I want something. Do you know what I'm saying, Richard?
Yeah. I can always cuss in Spanish and nobody will know. I get away with that.
So Richard and I are. I wish you were here, Richard. He's in Miami and I'm in Los Angeles, and we're on Zoom, and it's crazy, but we're both wearing pink, so that sort of brings us together in a way. Anyway. We are here to talk about where do poems come from, which is actually what I'm going to be doing in West Hollywood in May. But so where do they come from? And I'll start by reading a poem, the first poem from my new book, What She Wants. And the poem is called She'll Do Anything for Food. And the title is the first line of the poem. She'll do anything for food, the dog walker tells me. She speaks quietly, not wanting to insult her heavy-boned, one blue, one brown-eyed beast tugging at her leash. We did a doggy ancestor test, she confides. Discovered she's part wolf, part miniature poodle. Must be the poodle part, makes her so ravenous. Small creatures are ruthless feeders. Think of enraptured rats gnawing their way through orange trees, babies nursing, sucking so fiercely they can burst a nipple. Think of your heart, size of a throbbing fist, the part of you that will do anything for love.
Hey, Kim. So how I know you had shared an anecdote with me here and there about that poem and how it's where poems come from and then like how they happen in the world. But that's a poem that somehow people have always connected to in some way, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. But this is a poem, we talk about where do poems come from. This was directly an overheard, this was a conversation. I was going for a walk and a woman was holding her dog on a leash, and the dog started jumping up on me, and she said, she'll do anything for food. And I thought, well, I'm not sure I like the sound of that. But that was a prompt. One of the places poems they come from is when I overhear a conversation or a line I just have to use. And I came to my office and I wrote the poem. She'll do anything for food. So the thing, we'll talk about is a poem starts one way, and by the end, it's become something else, which is why we write, right? I mean, the surprise that we find when we're writing.
Yeah, yeah. I think that, yeah, it's interesting. Well, yeah, something that happens in real time, right? Just things you overhear in your window. But for me, and I think you're making me think about sometimes there's a fairly recent poem where like sometimes there's something that's always like has stuck in your head forever, right? And it might be that phrase that maybe you happen to write about it right away, but like sometimes it might be 10 years later where you're like, remember when that? And so sometimes there are these snippets of memory that happen, and maybe this profanity comes in the warning today, but like I was thinking about, like I tell my students sometimes, think about stupid shit you remember and you don't know why. There's a poem in that, right?
Right,
Right.
for
And
sure.
for me, there's let me see if I can find it here. There's one that ironically, well, not ironically, just I don't even know what the right word is, but I had always remembered it's I'm not going to give it away because it's in the poem, but in my last book, I needed a poem by my father. The book was kind of done. I was just like, let me just put together a poem. Who cares? Like yada yada yada. Um, and it was a snippet of memory. That's something that I always remember my father hearing from my father. And so here it is. Again, I don't want to give too much away. So sometimes poems come from snippets of memories or snippets of things that we hear just right on the street. My father in English. First half of his life lived in Spanish, the long syntax of las montañas that lined his village, the rhyme of sol with his soul, a Cuban alma that swayed with las palmas, the sharp rhythm of his machete cutting through caña, the syllables of his canarios that sung into la brisa of his island home, which he left to spell out the second half of his life in English in the vernacular of New York City sleet, neon, glass, and the brick factory where he learned to polish steel 12 hours a day. Enough to save enough to buy a used Spanish English dictionary, kept bedside like a Bible, studied 15 new words after his prayers each night, then practiced them on us the next day. Buenos dias, indeed, my family. Indeed, mas café. Have a good day today, indeed. And again in the evening, gracias to my bella wife, indeed, for dinner. ¿Hiciste tu homework? Indeed. La vida es indeed difícil. Indeed did indeed become his favorite word, which, like the rest of his new life, he never quite grasped. Overused and misused, often to my embarrassment, yet the word I most learned to love and know him through. Indeed, the exile who tried to master the language he chose to master him. Indeed, the husband who refused to say, I love you in English to my mother. Indeed, the man who died without true translation. Indeed, meaning in fact, en efecto, meaning in reality, de hecho, meaning to say now what I always meant to tell him in both languages. Thank you. Gracias for surrendering the past tense of your life so that I might conjugate myself here in the present of this country. In truth, así es, indeed. So that little snippet has been with me since I was like 7 years old of my dad always like saying indeed because he thought it would be like it made him feel like he really knew English. And it wasn't until I was like 40 or 50 something that the poem finally emerged.
I love that poem, Richard, and I love it. I love hearing you read it. And it is the beauty of poetry. It's that one word indeed that you heard and carried with you and remembered, and then gave just flower to this gorgeousness of what it meant. And there's humor in the poem because it's funny. It's funny that
Yeah.
that one word, right, became his sort of symbol. But there's such depth in that poem, and a story about immigration and how people learn the language, and that was the word he attached himself to. It seems like such an important word to say, indeed. And you as a child listening, and how years later you create this work of art based on it. I really think that that's what poetry, what wonderful poetry is all about, really. The poem is about one thing, but it's about all the other things.
Yeah, it's in some ways even a slightly social political poem, right? But it always comes from the personal in some ways. I mean, it's humorous, but yeah. But as you know a little bit, like sometimes we don't know where do poems come from, like because there was no pressure. I was just wanted this poem. I just wrote it in like one sitting, and it's my only poem that has ever been published in the New Yorker in my entire life. Like, go figure. Like,
That's amazing.
I
And it's
wish
one
I
of
wish
their
I could.
better poems, also understandable poem. But yeah, it is sort of the poem. There are some poems that just come right out. Thomas Lux, he's one of my great teachers and a great poet, would say a poem is a built thing. You build a poem. And we know that, all of us who write. But sometimes, miraculously, the poem comes out almost built, you know, and it's because we've been carrying it, as you
All
say,
our life, yeah.
all of our lives. And, there's a lot of poems that are written in our heads before they ever come out on the page. And then when
Yeah.
they come out, we're like, whoa, where did this come from?
They've been fermenting it. I do tell my students though, you can't build a poetic career on those moments, right? You know that. Like it happens every once in a while. Well, even not every once in a while, but yeah, it's because poetry is so much about the subconscious and how it's tickling us in some ways to write these things that we need to write.
Well, I that was something that was sort of gnawing at you, that the word indeed, it was something that was definitely going to be used for you. So one thing that where do poems come from? We've all heard of odes. When someone dies that we love, we write an ode to that person. So I grew up in New York City, as you know, and I spent a lot of time in phone booths in New York. I mean, I guess that's weird, but like in the 60s, we didn't have that much. We didn't have cell phones, but we had phone booths. So I recently read that all the phone booths in New York were just destroyed. They were taken away. And that, to me, that was horrible. So I wrote an ode to the phone booths in New York. So I'll share that with
That's
you.
awesome.
So, ode to the phone booths in New York City. We'd cram ourselves in after school. One more, just one more. Okay, you, our shoulders crushed, groping like idiots, cheeks smashed against the glass. One of us with a finger in the accordion door, pour our dimes into the slot, call our mothers to say Donna's for dinner or Joey's to study, then off we go to Central Park. Sometimes it was just me and Melissa. Thunderstorms, humidity creeping into the booth. She'd sit on the seat, heavy phone book on a wire swaying between us while I made collect calls with a fake credit card to random people, the excitement killing us. Senior year, It'd be me alone, excusing myself from my parents' dinner table, running a brush through my hair, elevator down, making the call to my boyfriend, filthy receiver in my hand, mouthpiece caked with someone else's spit, smelling like the inside of someone else's mouth. I'd hang up if his mother or sister answered. They couldn't know we were about to meet, walk into the dark opening of the park, find our spot below the American elms that lined the river, my heart pounding, fingertips laced with the sweat of strangers.
Well, that makes me think, wow. So, yeah, that brought me back to like, yeah, I had phone booths too, like, but oh God, they don't know what they're missing, right? But like, you're making me think of something that's sort of my own, a little bit of my own sort of one of my personal definitions of poetry, right? When you're experiencing these things, they seem like ordinary. It's not like a big deal, right? But poetry, right, and poets bother. So this is great. One of my adages or quotes that I live by Anais Nin that says writers taste life twice. And
Ah,
we bother to go back into those moments and like, what was that phone booth? What, like, and realize how unique and wonderful and full of complexities and joys and like sorrows and like every moment in our lives is. And I think that's one of the reasons that your poem brought that out. I mean, like I'm thinking about Bird Bowl, which is like 3 blocks from my house, where I first brought up my first pack of cigarettes. Normal day, like, but like how that's one of the things that where poetry comes from, to think about that theme, right? Like sometimes it's just like we experience these things, but most people, because I mean not to judge, but they don't necessarily go back through I think that poems are little time machines that they take us back and like, why why was that? Why did we do that? Right. And the gift, I think, where the poem goes is that then like you just gifted me a memory, not necessarily about, but these a moment in my life that seemed like whatever, it's just childhood. And I think that's our gift as poets, is to give that to someone else and say, like, think about that, your your wonderful kooky like teenage years in a phone booth or wherever you were, right?
I think the poem is about our experience, but the success of the poem is how it affects someone else. If they can see their own experience or their own life in the poem. The difference between journaling and writing a poem, as we know and we teach all the time, is it's got to be more than just our experience that's a private personal experience, but rather break it out so that whomever reads it will get something from that poem. Even if you didn't have phone booths where you grew up, you had something.
You had something,
You
the
had
bowling
some.
alley, you had Facebook.
Oh God forbid.
I mean, I'm talking like, well, even the kids now, they're like Facebook is so old for them. Like remember when we were on Facebook. But yeah, as you know, the adage of among poets is once we write a poem, it's no longer ours, right? Like in that sense,
Right,
like, and
right.
that is really the greatest gift, like the greatest compliment that anybody could give me. When they come up after reading and say like, that poem reminded me of when, etc. My father, my mother, when we used to like, etc. Now I know the poem has done its job in the world, and
Yeah, exactly. You want to know how the poem affected them. And we can write, we can make everything up because people also think poetry is all autobiographical. And the truth is we make a lot of stuff up. But what has to be true are the emotions and the feelings. You can't make those up. So, and those are the things that other people can relate to. That space in the phone booth that was private, that was secret, that was just their own. And listen, I wrote that poem. That was one of those poems, sort of like Indeed. It just kind of came out.
uh, uh,
Um, uh, because honestly, I never thought about those experiences until I read in the New York Times that they were taking all the phone booths away. And then suddenly I was just, wow, my God, and that's the joy of writing the poem.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we go back through back in time, and so I'm gonna maybe think about since we talked a little bit about humor, um um and I know you have some very humorous poems. I don't know if you're gonna read the squirrel one, but but anyway,
oh, you
um
like that little
um
squirrel poem?
humor is a weird thing in poetry because as I try to tell my students, it can't just be the punchline, right? There still has to have some gravitas, and it's a very weird sort of space to navigate, because um kind of a little bit like the Indeed poem, but sometimes I always try to write at least two or three like funny poems in my books, like which in the end of the day are not that funny to me. They're funny to readers, but the gravitas in my heart is very different. But humor, um, I think, doesn't find a place in a lot of poetry, and I think there are poets out there that really use humor, or humor is not even the right word, but whimsy maybe, in these amazing ways, and I think they get overlooked for like that kind of poem. So here's a poem that I, I maybe it's also from a snippet of memory, but it also has to do with. But anyway, I'll just read it. Um, it's called "The Name I Wanted." So just so you know, my real name isn't Richard. Well, it's not that far away, but you'll see. The name I wanted, not Ricardo, but Richard. Because, oh, wait, I'll put my glasses just in case we're at that age. Not Ricardo, but Richard, because I felt like Richard Burton, a true Anglo-Saxon in tights reciting lines from Othello. Because I wanted to be as handsome as Richard Gere in a white tuxedo. Because I had a pinky ring just like Richard Dawson on Family Feud. Because I knew I could be just as wholesome as Richie Cunningham, just as American as my father's favorite president, Nixon. Richard, not Ricardo, not my nicknames. El Negrito, the little dark boy for my skin, the color of dry tobacco when I was born, or El Galleguito, the little Galician, because that's what my tia Noelia called anyone like me, born in Spain, not 100% Cuban. Not Rico, the name Lupe wrote on my desk, branding me as Barry Manilow's Latin lover in ruffled sleeves, dancing conga at the Copacabana, all of eighth grade. And definitely not Ricardito, little Ricky, worse than Dick. Richard, descended of British royals, not the shepherds on my mother's family, not the plantain farmers on my father's side. Richard, name of German composers, not the swish of machetes, rapping of bongos. Richard, more elegant than my grandfather in his polyester suit, chiclets jingling in his pockets, more refined than my grandmother, gnawing mangoes, passing gas at the kitchen sink. Ricardo de Jesus Blanco, I dub thee myself Sir Richard Jesus White, defender of my own country, protector of my wishes, conqueror of mirrors, sovereign of my imagination, a name for my name.
Yeah, I love that. And all the cultural references, all the people, the actors, the shows, um, really make the poem come alive. And that's where you use humor. But the poem, it's funny, but it's not funny. It's really about your life and growing up, and just even the word chiclets in that poem. It's like, every word, as we all know, all the poets listening in, and every word we pick for a reason.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we might have 50 words before we land on the word that we're going to use. But, the chiclets, because we all remember grandparents having chiclets and the way they jiggled in the purse, and the peppermint. And it just brings to life these things from the past. And I love that poem, and I love the humor in it and the cultural references.
Yeah, and again, like the gravitas is the kid, struggling with identity at the end of the day, right? But also, it's funny that you mentioned that because sometimes in readings, I'm like, if the audiences are too young, I really hesitate reading that poem because of the references. And then sometimes I do, and it still lands because hopefully
Yeah.
what we're doing is beyond the specifics, that there's some underlying emotional context, right? That is coming through everybody, whether they know Chiclets or Richard Dawson.
Right. No, I think
They know the longing to like belong to something, right?
no, I think that's a really important point, and I grapple with that a lot when I'm writing. Will people understand this reference? Is this too old? And
Right.
there is something, there's something emotional in the references. Even if you don't know what chiclets are, you kind of get the idea, and you have to leave that in the poem. I mean, it's got to be in there. Um, all right, so I have one for you, Richard.
Okay, baby.
All right, so
Bring it on, Kimmy.
I'm gonna be oh, I wish you were here with me, Richard.
That would have been
Um,
fun in the Poetry Palace, right?
yeah,
Us
so
two.
very soon you'll be up there. So where do poems come from as our theme of the evening? So they come from memory, as you've shown, and they also can come from being given a prompt. So I was actually given a prompt thanks to Suzanne Lummis, the wonderful poet out here who is putting together an anthology called Poetry Goes to the Movies. Oh my God. If I'm going to send you a book, Richard, but it's a great anthology. And she called me up and she said, Kim, you have to write a poem for this anthology, but you have to watch the movie Get Carter with Michael Caine. It's a very noir, dark movie. I love Michael Caine. She loves Michael Caine. She said, you have to watch the movie and pick one line from the poem and write the poem about that line.
Wow. That's a great prompt.
Isn't that a great prompt? So we're like, is it on Netflix? Is it Hulu? What, I had to find Get Carter, but we found it and I watched it, and here's my poem. And again, the cultural references. Will people get it? I don't know. Anyway, the title is the first line, and it's the line I picked. You must be joking. I never eat breakfast.
Wait, that's something I would say. All right, go for it.
I'm watching the movie with my pad, waiting for the line, and then he says it. Michael Caine, you must be joking. I never eat breakfast. I thought, thank you. You must be joking. I never eat breakfast, said Michael Caine in Get Carter, chest bare, lighting up in bed, a cold-blooded killer, the morning after a one-night stand. A roll in the hay, as my mother's friend Elaine used to say. I wanted to be that woman lying next to him under the covers, black mascara streaked down my cheeks, wild hair, our legs entwined, seconds away from the men with guns breaking down the door. Why do we like these tough guys? $1 million question for the $1 million movie, which I'd watch every Saturday night on the little black and white when my parents were asleep. Love with the proper stranger. Natalie Wood gets pregnant by Steve McQueen. He marries her, does the right thing. And at 14, I fantasized about going too far in an old Corvette somewhere in Brooklyn or Queens with a guy who looked like Steve McQueen. My mother was relieved we lived in Manhattan. No cars for her to worry about, no tunnels or bridges, no back seats, just the Broadway bus where nothing much can happen except you might see someone get on with a bullet hole in his shoulder like I did going home from 57th Street after a date with a boy I didn't know. We went to see Prudence and the Pill. I was embarrassed. He was unappealing. And then on the bus, a man with blood dripping from underneath his coat. I used to wonder what a roll in the hay might be like with a murderer. Would he tell me he never ate breakfast? Would he tell me why he killed? Michael Caine went after the man who murdered his brother. Makes sense, I guess. Revenge is popular. If someone set fire to my house, I would find them. I would borrow a gun. Everyone, it seems, has one. I would pull the trigger on an empty stomach. I never eat breakfast either.
Wow. Okay, that ending like just like brought it home, right? Like, okay, so like as long as we're talking about like I've never seen the movie, but I who has not identified with all the core emotions that you're dealing with, right? Like whether it's that movie or another movie, right? Like there's just oh my God, wait, now I have to see that movie. That is just wow. Like I was thinking about the guy smoking in bed. That's probably me. Like I'm not the murderer, but like, and I never eat breakfast. But here's the thing with poetry, right? Like I noticed in the poem that you took the time to describe a little bit of what the movie was about. So we're also cognizant of that we want to give a little snippets of little imagery, right? Of like, and the imagery is universal because whether it's a guy smoking in bed, during that movie or yesterday for a reader, right? It's still the same idea, right? And that was really brilliant. Like I was like, you have to you kind of like, well, you brought the movie for us to life just enough without just necessarily narrating it, like, and it makes us it makes us more intrigued to watch the movie. And I tell my students, whenever you use illusions, the poem shouldn't rely on the illusion, but it should make the reader want to go after and go see that or look that up. And I'm totally going to see that movie.
Well, yeah,
But
that's,
then something also that is really interesting. Sorry, but like
but no, go ahead.
the self-implication in poetry, you taught me something there too. Like, or I'm thinking about how sometimes sometimes when we begin, and I imagine there's many writers in our audiences here. I don't know at what levels or whatnot, or what stages in there, but sometimes we're afraid to be vulnerable or to implicate ourselves in a poem.
Hmm.
The fact that you don't eat breakfast was like the perfect ending for which just said like, yeah, I could be that person, and that like sort of like you connected with there's a complexity of like villains, but also people we love, hate, and like anyway, yeah.
It was fun to write that poem, and it's fun when you're given an assignment.
Right.
It's different from just like your Indeed poem came to you. It's been with you forever. It was something that was going to get written. This was nothing I ever thought of writing about.
Right.
That was a real joy for me because it was such a surprise that she gave me this assignment, and I enjoyed it. And it was a shock to me when the last line came out. I mean, let's talk about that for a minute. All of us who write know, the surprise when we're surprised by our own poem, when
Right.
something comes out that we were like, "Whoa, where did that come from?" Sometimes it's almost creepy. Like, wow, I don't even want to be associated with that.
Right.
Like,
Right. And there's a moment like I told my I tell myself and I tell my students all the time, or I've told myself before I tell my students, like writing a poem is in a weird way like the most, and oddly it's the most self-centered, like egotistical, like arrogant thing you do in the world. But then in the process of making art of what you're experiencing in life, I mean, this is different because it was a prompt. You transcend that and then surprise yourself. And then there's something that you just like, whoa, like, and then as we said before, the poem's no longer yours. And now that becomes somehow the gift to the reader, that recognition that I'm this and I'm all of this and I'm not all of this. I'm everything, but it's yours now to deal with. Um,
Yeah.
so in in terms of prompts, I was thinking about I have like 80 poems laid out on my desk here that all fit the theme. Where do poems come from and where do they go? But the idea that that your project in some ways with West Hollywood, not that it was a occasion, well, in some ways it was an occasional poem, or it's commit. It's a poem that's occasioned, right? You make a call to like, and it was beautiful, and like what you did with the whole project during your tenure. But the idea of the occasional poem, but also that merges into commemorative poem or what is a commissioned poem. These kinds of things all blur.
Yeah.
And also the ekphrastic poems or like so. I'm going to read something that I think sort of merges a few of those things and also the social political. Um, so it's sort of the question, how do we solve when like you had that amazing prompt, right? So part of the problem, not part of the problem, but part of what we as poets have to do, we have to create our own prompts,
Yeah.
right? In some ways, right? Like
Indeed.
so for me, sometimes that happens with like current events or a friend tells me something or something that's I not oh like write this poem or do this, but anyway, this is a combination of several things. One, it's based on a project that was a collaborative project with a photographer on the theme of boundaries. So in some ways it was an occasion poem because I'm writing to some fixed thing, right? That's the prompt. I'm also writing to a photograph, so it's also an ekphrastic poem. Um, and then I had to figure out a way to solve this. So it's a photograph of the Rio Grande, where it forms the border between obviously U.S. And Mexico. And I thought I'd read it on because, of course, everything that's going on right now. And I thought I can't speak directly to that experience as a Cuban because we have special immigration status. But I also just started thinking larger than the issue at the moment and thinking about, well, what does the river think about this? And so it became a personification poem in the voice of the river to give it to all of humanity for their absurdity about borders and et cetera, et cetera. And so it's gonna get deep now. And again, this is in the voice of the river. Complaint of el Rio Grande, Froilin Barbieri. I was meant for all things to meet, to make the clouds pause in the mirror of my waters, to be home to fallen rain that finds its way to me, to turn eons of love-less rock into love-sick pebbles, and carry them as humble gifts back to the sea that brings life back to me. I felt the sun flare, praised each star flocked about the moon long before you did. I breathed air you'll never breathe. Listen to songbirds before you could speak their names, before you dug your oars in me, before you created the gods that created you. Then countries, your invention. Maps jigsawing the world into colored shapes, caged in bold lines to say you're here, not there, you're this, not that, to say yellow is in red, red is in black, black is not white, to say mine, not ours, to say war, and believe life's worth is relative. You named me. Big river drew me thick blue to divide. You split me in two, half of me us, the rest other, but I wasn't meant to drown children. Hear mother's cries, never meant to be your geography, a line, a border, your murderer. I was meant for all things to me. The mirrored clouds, sun's tingle, bird songs in the quiet moon, the wind and its dust, the rush of mountain rain, and us. Blood that runs in you is water flowing in me. Both life, both the truth we know. We know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's beautiful.
that's a crazy shift right now.
Well, I know you shifted. Now I'm like, what, my God, I'm in a whole other place. And see, that's what poetry can do. Put you, it's amazing. In 1 minute of hearing something, you're in a totally different world. And part of why we write, and we all talk about this, is to understand the inexplicable, to try to make sense out of what makes no sense. And so to use the river or the water as the voice is a beautiful thing to try to explain what we can't explain. So you have the water explain it. I love that. And that I've never done that. Well, I don't know if that's true.
You
I'm
have a
trying to
lot of
think.
characters in your poems, though, that you've done. But yeah,
What?
I think you have a lot of. I'm thinking about the taxi driver. I'll never forget that line. The taxi
You read that poem.
but I don't know. You
I
don't have to
can
read
read.
it, but
I can read that poem. It's an
but
old
like
poem. I can read it.
when we incorporate characters, you actually, now that I'm thinking about it, you incorporate a lot of characters. Like, and so in a way, that's persona, right? Like
Yeah,
adopting the voice of, or taking, like you just said, the poem you began with. I just heard this, like, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think, oh gosh, now I know you like that poem. It's from my first book, Air Kissing on Mars. And can I read it to you?
If you have it, and
I have it. I have look, Air Kissing on Mars, my first book,
it.
2010.
Because for that little moment, you adopt the persona, right? Like,
Yeah, I adopted the persona, right. And it's not as beautiful as your poem, I'm going to say right now. That poem is a poem we should look at and read and think about. This again, is funny, but it moved you
uh,
somehow that you remember it. So it's when there's nothing to say about it. I'll just read it. It's called Geography Matters. But until this moment, I didn't realize how important the title of this poem is. You know,
right. It's become more, right?
I now see this is an important title. Geography Matters. Taking car service from Del Rey to Miami International, 60 miles plus Route 95, past palm trees, junkers, swing sets, gators, giddy with humidity. And I have a driver who likes to talk. Fingers too chubby for a ring, his massive back, dents the leather, eyeglasses from the 70s. His accent familiar, maybe Russian. He points things out, headlines, each statement. Let me make you an example. Turns out he's from Yugoslavia, where he says people are better looking. They look better when they come from Eastern Europe or the islands, because it's when people mix that makes them more beautiful. Let me make you an example. Back home, back home, I taught geography, was well respected, didn't drive a car all day, though don't give me wrong. I like the people. They sometimes become friends. They like to listen. Back home, geography matters. Here, no one cares. I care, I tell him, lying, trying to change the conversation. I tell him I wonder why it takes an hour less to fly from LA to Miami than from Miami to LA, but that only excites him, makes him want to make another example. He tells me it's quicker going east because of the Earth's rotation, its geography. That's why I know. That's why I could make you this example. That's why I can tell you why the clouds move faster in the Florida sky, why I can't work at the rent-a-car because I need to be outside, even driving all day. And he takes out a pad, colored markers, blocks, wood, pipe cleaners, matchsticks, makes me many examples, a mockingbird wandering, the roof, an orange blossom, floating down a creek, a sketch of himself wading through a swamp, hands me a map of Croatia, grains of white sand slipping into the creases of the seats.
That's again humor, but also like it's funny because sometimes you write these poems, like you just realize how pertinent that is right now, right? It's a
Yeah.
poem about immigration, about the spirit of, the spirit, the immigrant spirit of America, about geography matters more now than ever. I mean, the way he thinks about the world that the empire doesn't, right? And the isolationism that we're going through right now, like it's like, I mean, yeah, I mean, I've read that poem like several times. I've heard you read it, and now it's like now fresh and new in a new context. This is the other great thing about, okay, how where do poems go? Like I'm sure it happens with poems that you read too, like, oh, like I'm reading this now in a new context where it's something that has deeper meaning. And that just happened for me with that poem. Like that guy is like a hero now. Like can that guy even exist today? Like, or where's this country turning to where like that kind of perspective isn't allowed, like it just takes on, hopefully, I think as writers, like where do poems come from? We hope that our poems live beyond that moment to like they're right fascinating to something, a deep rooted emotional sort of zeitgeist that we are experiencing, unfortunately, over and over again. And I mean, I've always thought of it as, to be honest, I always thought it was like, I just love when it says, like, let me make you an example. Because I've so often thought, like, why does it fucking take that long to get back? But now I'm like so reading it on another level, like how he's almost heartbroken and like the idea that, and then the speaker is also kind of like learning something. And like you said, like I'm trying to ignore him, but like, like you can't, like there's something beautiful in that exchange between people that we're learning from each other. There, um, as we anyway, I'm not going to get into
Wow,
the dark
Richard,
space, but
I love that you suggested this poem that I read it. I haven't read this poem in years, and it moved me. It
yeah.
actually moved me. I don't remember writing it. I remember going on that drive, but I also used to love to listen to these drivers talk about their lives and where they came from and what it was like. And I mean, wow, okay, you know, oh,
Yeah, I have on my Uber app like silence, please, and like, but every once in a while you get one of these drivers that you're like,
right,
what? Like, can you just come down here, like, join me at the bar? Like,
right, right.
but that it also captures this beautiful American spirit in somewhere, that sense of like we're all learning from each other and thinking about. Anyway, how are we doing on time? And I know we want to read a couple mother
We
poems.
do want to read. I think now's the time to do it. I mean, Richard and I, we have a lot of things. We have a lot in common, and, and we love each other's work, which is a very nice thing to have in common. But we write a lot of narrative poems, and we also write a lot of poems about our mothers. Um, uh, just to say that anyone who lives in town in Los Angeles, we will actually be live in person at Chevalier's bookstore on Mother's Day. Isn't that something? Reading our mother poem. So I'm so excited. Richard will be here. And yeah, so come on down to Chevalier's and have pizza after. So, Richard, you go first. You read one of your beautiful mother poems.
Okay, yeah, sure. This is actually an old poem from my very first book that still sticks with me. As you know, some of our older poems, some stay with us, some go away, or some come back somehow.
Content.
Uh, but a couple things. Uh, you may not need to know this for the poem, but like my mother figures prominently in my poetry because first of all, she left Cuba 7 months pregnant with me, so that was already a thing. But she left her entire family behind in Cuba, her parents, her 8 brothers and sisters. And so I've always carried that with me. I've always felt that longing, that loss, uh, the strength and the facade of her trying to give us the best and the sacrifices she made to come to this country for us, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on and on. And in some ways, um, I've written about my mother in a way. I don't want to say to heal her because I'm not that powerful, and neither is my poetry, but an attempt to um, give her something back for what she gave up, and to let her know that I understood her. And so, in part, this is part of that poem, but it also is the moment in my life, which I was in maybe my early 20s, where you realize your parents are not aliens. When you realize they're just as fucked up as you are. I think we got to put in some profanity here for the warning, right? Right? That they've just been trying to figure this shit out just like you have, right? And that all you think they don't have a life? Oh my God. Like, so I think all that is some way in here. And it happened in a very quiet moment, which I attribute to, in some ways, to William Carlos Williams, the Red Wheelbarrow, of just finding, as I said earlier, the extraordinary in the seemingly ordinary of our lives. It's called Mother Picking Produce. She scratches the oranges, then smells the peel, presses an avocado just enough to judge its ripeness, polishes the macintoshes, searching for bruises. She selects with hands that have thickened, fingers that have swollen with history around the white gold of a wedding ring she now must wear as a widow. Unlike the archived photos of young, slender digits captive around black and white orange blossoms, her spotted hands now reach into the colors. I see all the folklore of her childhood, the fields, the fruit she once picked from the very tree, the wiry roots she pulled out of the very ground. And now, among the collapsed boxes of yucca, through crumbling pyramids of golden mangoes, she moves with the same instinct and skill. This is how she survives death, her country, and her son on these humble duties that will never change, on those habits of living which keep a life alive. She holds up red grapes to ask me what I think. And what I think is this a new poem about her. The grapes look like dusty rubies in her hands. But what I say is this they look sweet, Mama. So sweet.
Mm, beautiful. So beautiful, Richard. They look
Thank you.
sweet, Mama. So sweet. You know, we work so hard. It's like writing a poem is like going on a hike, and you're going on a hike, but you don't know where the end of the hike is. You don't know where it is, and then you land on it. You land on it with the last line. So sweet,
Yeah.
Mama. So sweet. And it's like, we know, like, oh, thank God I got to finish this hike, you know? And sometimes the hikes never end. They just go on and we can't find the ending. But so
That's very
that
eloquent, but like I know that exactly how you read into that. And I'm like, how? But also the idea is like, I just pulled that out of my ass. But that's poetry for you, right? You're just like, and then this
Um,
line comes to you, and you're like, that's the fucking end of the poem,
yeah,
right?
no, absolutely, it's completely. But it sometimes it just happens like a miracle, or as you so eloquently put, pulled it out of your ass,
Or
But
sometimes you overwrite and then have to find, okay, no,
yeah,
it ends
right.
here, right? Like,
Right. But it when it comes and it's hard and it's fast and it's solid. And people always say in all my classes, and I'm sure yours, and we say to ourselves, is this poem finished? How
right.
do you know when a poem is finished? And it tells you when it's finished.
Yeah.
It literally gets up and walks away and looks at you and
Yeah.
says, bye.
You're like, good night.
Good
Don't let the
night.
bad bugs bite.
But that's a beautiful. Does your mother love that poem? She must love it.
Well, this book hasn't been translated, so like she has a working level, but like so the third book, she really understood how much. I mean, there's poems about her in every book, and only the third book, and she really had a moment where it said like, I didn't know how much you cared about not only her but also the family that she, because I write poems about her family. I've been to Cuba, etc., and so her lines were like, I didn't know you were paying that much attention.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really interesting. Um, I wrote so many poems about my mother, but she was dead and never heard them. But I mean, I don't know why I'm laughing. But anyway, I think of her when I write them, and sometimes I read them to her, and she's like, "Yeah, you got it." Like I feel, I've said this often to people that and your mother's still with us, which is lovely, and you can talk to her and you can translate them for her. But a lot of times when your parent has passed on, maybe like your dad,
Yeah, yeah,
you,
very much.
you develop a closer or a different relationship with them being dead through the work you write
Hmm.
about them.
Hmm.
And I talk about that in classes too, that you can develop a new relationship with the deceased parent through the way you write to them and what you say that you couldn't say when they were alive. You know what and that's a very exciting idea,
Uh,
really. Um, so I mean, I'll read one of my mom poems and then I guess we'll have a conversation. We'll break it out. But I mean, I thought I could read I Wore This Dress Today for You, Mom, which is the cover, but I feel like reading another one, maybe a sadder one. I think we should end on a sad note, Richard. No, but yeah, this poem starts out funny but doesn't get funny, so we'll check it out. But people like this poem because of the title, "The People in the Health Food Store." And it's well, I won't talk about what health food store. We all have a health food store that we go to because we think we're going to get healthy from going there. And it costs hundreds of dollars for a milkshake. Anyway, the people in the health food store don't look healthy, which is why they're here. I'm here to get carrot chips, craving crunch, flavor. After visiting my mother at the home, where flavor only appears in faint whiffs of memory, where people in wheelchairs suspiciously eye the applesauce on their trays, delivered by chubby nurses in red scrubs, pictures of ponies or baby elephants stitched onto pockets that contain their syringes and keys to the lounge. The people in the health food store look dirty, wear spandex, have spaces between their teeth, prowl the aisles for natural supplements, inner peace, Ola Loa energy drinks. So only the other losers will die, not them. Not after they cleanse their bodies of all impurities, destroy lingering negative thoughts. What if my baby never learns to talk? What if I suddenly forget how to walk? What if the earth sucks me deep into hell like the hell my mother lives in, where when I visit, she asks me, who put me here? When did this happen? It was only yesterday she sipped martinis on the rooftops of Manhattan. So it's no wonder I run for the health food store, fill my basket with miracle cream to rub in every pore, stock up on Wrinkle Warrior, buy a year's supply of brain enhancers. So when it's my turn to stare out the window wearing floral pattern daytime pajamas, I'll remember who I am, who I was, who I once loved.
Good choice. I'm not even gonna get in. Yeah. I mean, so we'll open up the question, but I'm getting back to what you were saying, how from my father you mentioned this, and this how we can build a relationship through these little snippets of memory, indeed, or like and recreate. Like to me, it's a way of speaking to my father and then seeing myself. That is so powerful how you end that poem. That, I just turned 1 year older than when my father died, and that was a big year for me. It was really my dad died when I was 22. So like thinking about how poetry lets us have conversations with that we never had, right? Or tell them things we never told them, and contemplate the world through their eyes. Like who are they? And compare and contrast like you did in that poem so beautifully. But besides that, also like, yeah, the whole critique on like the if I only have a if I only have if I only eat this or buy that, and then that generation which like ate like God knows what they ate, like smoked like dogs. I'm not defending any of this, but like it's all genetics at the end of the day. But not all, but like makes you think about how they enjoyed their lives, what they thought about what regrets they had. Like I don't know, so many, but how scared we are of death too in this country, which is really in some ways that's almost a little bit of a not a social political, but it's a commentary on a social commentary poem. I can't stand sometimes like, you know what? Most of the people that want to live forever like should not. They're the most obnoxious. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm taking off the gloves here. I'm
yeah,
putting on the. It's like, come on, like, just we're gonna die. Maybe that's something that poetry lets us acknowledge. Also, like
yeah,
every step of the way to say,
yeah,
like, it's okay.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's okay.
I like that. I think there's truth in that. Um, this poem will live on long after I'm gone, you know. Uh, but anyway, Richard, you and I, we could read poems to each other like all night. Um, so anyway, I think they want us to have a Q&A now, but it was so fun to do this with you. And I can't wait till you come out to Los Angeles and do it in person.
Yeah, it'll be like, and yeah, it'll be really special too. Because we're doing it later in the evening, right? So kind of like hopefully people make up anyway. Not like,
But we'll
um,
see. Yeah. I
but
mean,
it's this is. I think we're also saying like this is us sitting also across like your your kitchen table, right? Poetry should be about at the kitchen table. It's like
yeah.
we can have I encourage people all the time when we think about occasional poems. It isn't like because Barack Obama asked you to write a poem. Write a poem for a birthday party or like a graduation. Bring poetry into your lives, into the living rooms, into your kitchens. Like there's something to be learned in the power of the art. And we certainly know it, but like I just I'm having a blast and it's like 10:30 my time.
Yeah, it's late for you. It's almost my bedtime, and it's so. Anyway, I hope, we can't see who's out there watching, but Cody, Mike, are there questions for us, or what's happening out there in Zoom land?
TV land.
I think everyone is enjoying this conversation so much. You've shared with us. I, I'll say, like, it's really easy to be cynical right now and to think, that our words don't matter, that poetry is just words. But you've shared so many examples of, um, giving us new perspectives, new understanding of how to see the world, touching our hearts. And I find myself lately looking for the places that make me feel like renewed and connected as a human being to others, and to finding like joy and meaning and perspective. So this has been so helpful and valuable for all of us in the audience. There is a question I'll relay from one of our attendees, and this is for well, there's one for Richard and then one for Kim. So we'll start. Richard, your poetry often explores themes of identity and belonging. How has your perspective on these themes evolved over time, and how does it influence the stories you choose to tell?
Yeah, sure. So as I like to say, poet is writing one poem of their life, obviously figuratively. And that question of identity, belonging, home, the big H word, has always obviously been with me since I got here when I was 45 days old. My mom left Cuba pregnant, as I said, 7 months. I'm born in Spain, and then I'm here 45 days old. I mean, I didn't grow up with consciously knowing about this question. When I started writing, that came to fruition. It's evolved over time. At first, and this is something that I like to bring out in my writing. I think there's a misconception that people, or that children of immigrants, or even though I'm an immigrant by 45 days old, that they embrace their given culture, and it's not true. We Nobody wants to be their parent. Like, right? So I try to tell sort of,
Sorry, moms. Sorry, dads.
no, but at a young age, right? You're always rebelling, and you're always like, okay, I don't want to dance salsa. Like, who's gonna want to? I don't want to speak Spanish. So it's really a story of really embracing and learning how amazing your culture is. And these stories are really true, and that's where you come from. And so there was a moment then where I went to Cuba, and I became like totally enthralled by my Cuban history, went to see again my entire half of my family of my mother's side was in Cuba, like 30 cousins I had never met. So I turned into that. And all this is reflected in my writing in some way or another, right? In each book. Um, but then there was a disconnect with Cuba because it's the Cuba of now versus the Cuba of my parents. And I moved from the Republic of Miami to Connecticut, and I became, well, let me try being a New Englander. And then I like just tried to be that American that I thought I was supposed to be. And then that didn't quite work out. And then I traveled a lot thinking, well, it's not this Cuba, it's not this version of America that I thought existed for real from the Brady Bunch. And then after traveling a lot, I thought, well, there's no home out there for me either. I put the question to rest for a long time. Uh, and then eventually, when President Obama asked me to write a poem for America, those questions is like, am I even a fucking American? What does that even mean? Do I even love this country? Does this country love me back? Am I part of this narrative? So that started a whole new, and then I finally felt embraced by this country in a way that, not that I felt rejected, but finally, oh no, yeah, I don't have to be Peter Brady. This is America. And then, I'm sorry, it's a big question. And
Yeah.
then, so I'm like, finally, like, I'm Joe America, I'm like, and then the White House is trying to drive me crazy. So they decided to ask me to write a poem and deliver it at the reopening of the U.S. Embassy in Havana. And then I was like, maybe I can like get a little place in Cuba. Like, long story, hopefully ending here. that experience and where I'm at in my last book, which is called Homeland and My Body, I realized that I've maybe never really had a home and never lost one, that it
Mm.
all exists in me and that all these experiences are not true or false, that they all real, and that home is a state of mind, and that I don't have to pick one, so to speak. And for decades, I just thought I had to pick one, you know.
Mm.
And the idea of also the ego of thinking that you have to find a home is still, I realized, was an egoic sense of self, which is a sense of oh, I want to live in paradise and just I'm gonna move to Costa Rica and like that's gonna be my newfound like I love watching all those those shows of like where they buy places like what is it? House Hunters International. They're like, we just love to entertain. Like, I'm like, okay, here's the thing. You're going to be bored shitless in 5 years. Like, and nobody's going to like you. Just,
Right.
just off the bat, you're a foreigner. Like, you're just going to be with the same expat neighbors that came down here and you're all going to hate each other. I'm
Love
joking,
that.
but home is just this egoic place also that I stopped going there.
Mm. That you'd also been writing towards the whole
Yeah.
time. That's interesting.
And also art is home, like the idea that my conversation, art itself, my poetry is a home. I
Mm.
exist there in a way that is the most real home I've ever had.
Yeah. This next question is for Kim, and we've had a few come through, so we're going to keep you on your toes answering all of these. Kim, your ability to capture everyday moments with such emotional depth is remarkable. How do you decide which experiences are worth turning into poetry, or what inspires you to bring them to life?
Let me make you an example.
You know, that's a great question.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I think I have an ear. Well, a poem basically feels like it's jumping in my lap. Like I have an ear for what sounds like it's going to work as a poem. You know, the woman says to me, looks at me and says, she'll do anything for food. I mean, boy, that woman has no idea what's going to happen next after she says that. You know, I think that I hear things or I see things, I read things, they immediately pop out at me. And that becomes the beginning of a poem. Where the poem goes, nobody knows. Uh,
Hmm.
I don't even really know, but there are many, many, many poems that came out of something I saw or overheard or read that just seemed, you know, I just read that we had an earthquake here in San Diego a couple of days ago that was pretty strong. And there was a story about how the elephants at the San Diego Zoo made a circle around their baby elephants right after the earthquake to protect them. And that's a mind-blowing thing. I mean, I started looking at all the articles because that is a poem. That's a
Hmm.
poem, even the title of the poem. So you know immediately whether it's current event, whether it's something you read, whether it's something you overhear. Um, I just know, I know when it needs to be a poem. The only thing I worry about is if I don't have a pad and pen, but now with my
Hmm.
phone, you know, you just turn it on and you dictate in the notes and you email it to yourself and I get back to wherever my computer is and there's the poem in the making. So you know, as I always tell students, there's no such thing as writer's block if you're alive and breathing. And every day there's a poem to be written. It's there for you. There's a prompt waiting for you everywhere.
Hmm. So on that topic of what you're writing about, are there topics right now that you feel are in ascendance, like they're so important right now you have to write about them, and has that been easy or difficult to address?
That's a big question. I've just been on a book tour for the last 3 months in a lot of cities, and everyone wants to ask that question with the given, you know, situation in the world. Are you writing more? Are you writing about it? And the answer is no, 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 no. I mean, honestly, I feel I can't watch the news. I can't really deal with the things that we are all, you know, in our faces. I'm more interested in the elephants making a circle around
Mm-hmm.
their babies after an earthquake. I'm more interested in the woman who says she'll do anything for food. I mean, there will be the poem, the political poem, the poem about what's happening. It will be inside that poem. When we get out of the poem, it will be there. But
Mm-hmm.
I can't write, I can't address what's going on now because I'm just, I can't. I have no interest. I've got no, it doesn't come to me.
Hmm. Yeah. So here's another question. And I know we have, a little bit of time left. I'll try to get through these. Richard spoke about how poets are figuratively writing the same poem over and over. For both of you, how do you decide if or your poetry is um, exploring different facets of an issue or experience, or being unintentionally repetitive? You don't get called repetitive, I don't think.
No, I
Hope
think
not.
I think it was like sort of what I explained because you're always constantly evolving with your big
Mm,
question. You're never really answering it. It just keeps on shifting. I call it's like a mirage that just when you think you got there, it shifts. And so for me, it's always there are moments where like I got nothing left. I don't got another book in me about this shit. And then Barack Obama calls, right? You're and then I thought that was it, right? And then now part of what happened with this last book was middle age, thinking about mortality and also the pandemic. And so that
yeah.
shifted my sense of what home meant and community. So I've learned to trust that that theme will evolve. So, but I will resist trying to write the same poem. I mean, there's always a little bit because family always comes back in some ways, but I trust that it won't be the same. It won't be the same.
Mm.
That
Yeah,
it's a variation on a theme, right? Like
the
music.
variation. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I say all the time that our obsessions don't change, just the way
Mm.
we write about them.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that that's true. And I wrote the book. I wore this dress today for you, Mom. All the poems being about motherhood, being a mother, and it was like, that's it, Mom. Bye. You're done. Close the door. And then she keeps creeping into, she's even in the Michael Caine poem.
Yeah,
Sky's there.
they keep coming back.
They keep coming back. So it's like these are our memories, our thoughts, our feelings. And we're writing about the same thing. And Bill Knott, the great poet, Knott, great poet, says we write this one poem our whole lives. We
Hmm.
write one poem our whole lives. Well, I mean, we are who we are, our personalities, what makes us up, what we remember, what we feel, our sense of humor. So yeah, hopefully we won't be too repetitive, you know. But
Yeah. But and I think it's also like thinking that it's really about that one question that you know you're never going to completely answer your life. So that I have no answer yet what home is. It's just tentative, and I think that keeps it. I just want to say something because that's so important where we're going through right now with poetry and how people are looking to poetry. So one, one of my little adages, I was like, so a lot of my social political poems were written before Trump was elected in 2016, and it seems like you could read them today. So I always like to say, poets, when things seem to be going well, they're like, what's fucked up? And when things are really fucked up, they're like, look at that beautiful flower. I think that and I was talking to Rachel McKibbins, who's one of my favorite poets who visited my class, but you know, talking about beauty and community right now is radical
Yeah.
because there's so much noise in the world that I think this is what poets will then do. They're like, one of my most poems that I took me 20 years to finally understand is by Adam Sajewski to try to praise the mutilated world. And I finally
Mm.
understood that poem. Like,
Mm.
so it's not that we're backing away from that. It's just that when there's so much hate and division, what we need is beauty, right? And so, not that we're not going to write the political poems as well or whatnot, but I'm also like Kim. I'm sort of like on the fence with that right now. It'd be like stating the obvious. Like, what are you going to do with that? Like, and so we're watching posts that I have to watch and absorb and take in, and then, but we need community. We need to hold our people close, and we need to give them a little bit of love and joy and beauty, and remember that there are beautiful things out there despite all the crazy things. And I think that's another way that poetry can serve a social political cause
Hmm.
in a weird way, right? I mean, not a weird way, in a not a, in an unexpected way.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So
that's
there's a
not true.
yes. There's a question from our YouTube audience about the art of sharing poetry, and the role of conversation in deciding which poem next to share. One thing that I think has been so wonderful about tonight is that you both read each other very deeply, your poetry and also your friendship. And it's been a delight to, see you able to pull out these gems from the past and have this like ongoing conversation about your creative careers. And um, do you have any thoughts or advice for other poets on the role of conversation in sharing poetry?
Well, Kim, you got it.
Well, it's like everything else in life. You connect or you don't connect. I mean, Richard and I connected immediately. You don't know why. I mean, his poetry really speaks to me, even though we come from such different backgrounds and worlds. We're totally different. But I get his poetry. I love his poetry. I think he gets my poetry. So our conversations are always around poetry and poems because they speak to each other. It doesn't always happen that way with poets. There's so many different kinds of poets and poetry. It's like Amy Gerster says, poetry is like food. You got to find something you like because there's so much different kinds. And we just kind of like the same meals. But we can also talk about poetry in a way that's similar. I don't well, so Cody, I'm totally not answering your question, I think. I'm sorry.
I think you got it. I think you got
Oh,
it.
okay.
So,
Okay. I think just because you're a poet, not all poets, like not all dogs or not all people, it's like you're not all going to play in the doggy park together.
right.
Well, some dogs don't get along with other dogs and some dogs, whatever.
Find your bestie.
you know,
Right?
but so just because you're a poet doesn't mean you necessarily um, connect. But we connect in that we're all at the end of the day looking to figure out where to break that line,
Mm,
choose the right word, build that poem. That is what we all have in common, that we want to make the best product we can make
mm,
and send it out into the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and again, it also speaks to the universality, ironically, to this against the specificity of poetry and what Kim writes about versus what I write about, right? Um, but I found in Kim, like, there's like, we have also a great sense of humor, but because Cuban, it doesn't matter. Like we're always joking. Like I'm exhausted. Like the Jewish. Like it's just there's a core emotional bottom line that you share with with some
mm,
writers, and it has nothing to do with what you write about necessarily, right? Um, but I think for the most part, we mostly connect, where they not connect. As far as this is a very special reading because this is again, like I said, this is us sitting at the kitchen table mostly. This is not something brand new for us, although we, obviously wanted to put our best foot forward here, but and there's a lot more cussing at our kitchen table at your kitchen table. But but I would also say that, like Kim was saying, that we're storytellers. As far as like when I do an individual reading, I really like to string the poems together and think about what is the story that I'm trying to tell. Not like for my next poem, I'm gonna, and then like for my next poem, and like what is I open with saying this is the question of my life, and all these poems have to do with this. And I'm going to take you through a little journey of how that's changed, or whatever that may be. So I would say that's more that's a little more difficult. The single reading, right?
mm,
And I love Kim's. I think we share that we're storytellers, like she said earlier. Like we love to weave a narrative into when we present.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you
So
both for sharing with us.
I'm gonna jump
Welcome,
in and call
welcome back,
time.
Mike.
I loved this conversation. I, for one, could listen to the two of you talk for hours, and I feel like this was a nice, like, we got to just listen to two people who know each other quite well and listen in on this conversation. So thank you. And there's a gem that Richard said about my art is my home that I'm gonna hold on to. That's gonna be my mantra
Beautiful.
for the future. So I just want to say thank you to both of you. And thank you to the audience. Thank you, Cody, for moderating. And thank you, Jen, for that wonderful introductory poem that you wrote for the city. As you all know, we've got all those wonderful poetry classes coming up. You should go to Kim's. She's an amazing teacher. Go to Chevalier to see Richard and Kim in person next month. And we also have lots of WeHo Reads programs online. You can watch them all, share them with your friends, please. And then we have a queer arts festival happening Memorial Day weekend, the WeHo Pride Arts Festival.
Yay.
Please come to that. Jen is teaching an improv class, and we've got some other literary things going on. And I would love to see you there personally. Thank you all. Happy National Poetry Month.
Thank
Be
you
well,
so
be
much,
safe.
everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.